Plasma membranes, also called cell membranes, are the barrier between the living and the non-living. Since all life is made of cells, life as we know it, then we can say that the cell membrane separates all cell contents from the outside environment. Right? Physical separation is what a cell membrane does, but in no way does it isolate cells. Cells continue to exchange with the environment through the cell membrane. But just as you can open and close the doors and windows in your home to regulate heat and airflow, cell membranes can do the same by inserting and removing proteins in the cell membrane. This leads us to apply this special term, fluid mosaic. Fluid because they're always dynamic, they're always changing, and mosaic because a cell membrane is made of many different parts. Although cell membrane proteins seem to be our focus for cell membranes, there are other characteristics, such as cholesterol in a cell membrane that provides support. In this class, we'll encounter muscle cells, which are also called muscle fibers, and we give their cell membranes a special name, sarcolemma, and the same goes for the axons of neurons. We specialize their cell membrane to axolemma. The cell membrane at its heart is really just a double layer of phospholipids. Recall, phospholipids have a polar or water-loving head, polar or water-loving head of glycerol, and then they have these nonpolar or water-hating tails. Arranged into a cell membrane requires the phospholipids to line up in two layers. But for each layer, the polar heads are facing either the aqueous inside or outside of the cell, and this creates an area where the nonpolar tails are all concentrated. And this is what creates a barrier for polar molecules. We'll approach this in greater detail, but we'll find that the cell membrane in this area right here has that nonpolar tails, which prevents glucose and water from actually crossing the cell membrane. I'm not kidding when I say that this here, right here, this is an anatomical drawing. It is. So let's apply some of the terms of the fluid compartments in the first chapter. Inside the cell, inside all cells, is their cytoplasm. And if we were to take all of the cytoplasm from all of your cells and squeeze it out into a cup, that would be your intracellular fluids. All the fluid that is outside of a cell is called the extracellular fluids. When we are specifically talking about a grouping of cells in this class, we can use the term interstitial fluid. Next semester, when we consider the fluids that are trapped in blood vessels, we will start to use the term extracellular fluid. But this semester, intracellular fluid, IF, is perfectly acceptable. The phospholipids and their bilayer, it's definitely the most prominent component of a cell membrane. But, there are many more components. These little orangey molecules right here that I'm poorly circling in a yellow highlighter, these little molecules right here are cholesterol. And cholesterol, it provides support for cell membranes, kind of giving them their shape. And this is why lipids are very important in your diet. You're always making cells, always. And you need cholesterol to do that. On the outside of the cell here are these things which are labeled A, and these are what are called glycolipids, which are just big sugary fat molecules. These make something like a sugary coating all over your cells, something called the glycocalyx. It makes me think of Sour Patch Kids with all the sugar on the outside. The glycocalyx, it's basically an outside coating, but it plays a really important part in your immune system. Uh, it's kind of like a name tag for your cells. Everything else labeled on this picture, all of those things between B and H, I think it is, all of them are proteins. Some of them span the entire length of the cell, like this one here, C, this one here, E, and this one here, H. So these span the entire membrane, and they look like they've tunneled through the membrane. This over here, C, this looks like it's got a channel through the membrane. And over here, H, this looks like an alpha helix. Transmembrane proteins, which span the entire length of the cell membrane. These transmembrane proteins, they usually play a part in some kind of transport through the cell membrane. Ions and molecules can leak across the membrane, and then they get pumped back to their original position. Or molecules and ions can even act as a key to open gates on these proteins. There are other proteins that don't span the length of the cell membrane, and these are called peripheral proteins. Peripheral meaning to the side. Most peripheral proteins are on the inside of the cell and probably attached somehow to the cytoskeleton. There are some proteins on the outside of a cell, and many times these proteins also attach or anchor to other cells or proteins in the extracellular environment. Basically, there's just a lot of proteins.